It's the best of the best. It's the one and only.
You can't handle the truth.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Alright. Ready? Let's go ahead, motherfucker. What the fuck wrong with you? Bro, you gotta touch it. Oh. I was there watching. Okay.
Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
Sneakers on, getting ready for a flashback. Time keeps moving on, looking at you feeling like I could never get enough of you. And I could never get enough of you. I could never get enough of you.
I don't want them, no, get them all off me. Say down for L, she a cause, you see. 4 cars deep, we'll come through on a late night. Chicken spot, wings and fries, we call that a day night. Lights on, sold out, I don't have no stage right. Knew that I was built for this forever, ever, ever.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
We ride bands, 10 times 10, all my friends, it's for real.
I ain't scared of you motherfuckers.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. So listen responsibly.
It's the best of the best. It's the one and only DJ Ice, Louisville's coldest DJ.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Hey, welcome to the show here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. I am Carl Price, your host. Get my voice together. We're going to talk about some cowards tonight. We're going to talk about some cowards from Texas. And we wonder whether this is an example of police departments all over this nation. Is this really, really a bad mark on law enforcement all across this country? Is this the real law enforcement? So here's what happens, right? The federal government, the police foundations, as well as a lot of other governments, a lot of local, state, and federal governments pour money into, or let me just say fund, because remember there was this discussion about defunding the police, et cetera, but they pour money into these police departments and they give them all of this equipment. And then when it's time to use it and time to act, the cowards just stand outside. So we're going to get a little bit deep into Uvalde. I have avoided talking about this because I'm a little sensitive at times, especially when it comes to kids and trying to explain why kids had to leave us so early And this one in Uvalde, was not like nowhere close to Sandy Hook, uh, Parkland, a little bit close, not close to Parkland, even though there was an officer outside that didn't go in. Remember, we were reminded of this in Florida during the Parkland shooting, the Parkland High School shooting, right? The school resource officers stood outside and just didn't do anything. So, but here, these cowards just stood outside and let these kids get killed. Even there is one piece of footage out there, even a law enforcement officer who indicated to other law enforcement officers that he had gotten a text from his wife that said she had been shot. So he wanted to go in, and they stopped him from going in. This is more than just an epic failure. So the question tonight, although the title, you all saw the title. Let me see if I can get the title back up there. You all saw the title. I can't get the title back up there. I'm going to have to put it back up there myself. But here's the title. You all see this title, Cowards in Uvalde. Fake police. Fake police. So the question is really, is that what we're dealing with, fake police? Or is this just an introduction of what's to come when we find ourselves putting this stuff in law enforcement hands and it just doesn't happen? I know y'all want something juicy to talk about, like relationships and why the man cheated and why the woman cheated on him. But I'm going to talk a little bit serious tonight. I'm going to talk more about this shooting because I think it's time for us to take a serious check of law enforcement in this country. There was a young man in Memphis who ran a stop sign, and they chased him all the way into his home, beat him, tased him, did all of that. But 400 police officers, law enforcement officers are outside of this school for an hour while these kids are being killed and while this gunman's in there shooting. And then the first thing they say to me, you want to come out? You want this to end peacefully? It didn't end peacefully for 19 children and a couple of school teachers. So that's what I'm talking about tonight. It may bore you, and if it does, but it may make you cry, because I'm going to show you some raw video where the video actually breaks down the timeline of these police. And I want y'all to join me on Comment Central tonight. I can't see if I see it there. Yeah, on Comment Central tonight, and tell me before you take off to go to the Jazz Festival in Cincinnati, tell me whether really what should be done other than firing these law enforcement officers. And maybe Biden, I mean, we can't just blame it on Texas. I mean, the first law enforcement officers to show up on the scene were Border Patrol and some other federal officers, but they showed up. They showed up, but nobody showed out. And this is just epic. And I know everybody's wondering, not like there hasn't been white kids that have been killed by mass shootings, but everybody's wondering, is it a situation where it mattered that these were all Hispanic children and mostly Hispanic officers? But my focus don't want to go to race tonight. My focus clearly wants to go to law enforcement. And do you really feel protected? I mean, I feel better with Barney Fife today's, at least in Texas, than I would with some police officers. And in Indiana recently, there was a shooting. They call it mass shooting because more than 2 people get shot. But in Indiana, y'all know what happened, right? It wasn't even law enforcement that shot the guy. It was a citizen. So I don't know. And that begs the question, the NRA is talking about, armors all, so we can just have a shootout when stuff like that happens. I don't know what the answer is, but I want y'all to explore with me tonight this idea of what do we do with the police now that you put them to the test. You give them all of this equipment, you put them to the test, and they become an epic failure. I can't imagine any civilian that will stand outside of a house for an hour while there's a gunman in there, especially if they have enough tactical equipment to go in there and try to take him out. You know, bulletproof vests. I don't know if these guys knew what bulletproof vests were really designed to do. They're designed to stop bullets. And they have stopped a lot of police officers from being fatally harmed. So that's what you have them on for. The helmets, all of that stuff. Now, I know the old dude had an AR-15 or a really powerful war weapon, but y'all got to stay with me on this one because I've been baffled for weeks about this. But I'm going to show y'all some stuff tonight, and I'm actually going to present to you all an article that came out today from the New York Times. The individual is going to be shown somewhere over here tonight. While I'm talking about the article, but I'm curious as to whether y'all believe that it is an epic failure. Yeah, and I am talking about the traffic stop, Greg, down there in Knoxville. Thanks for watching me tonight. I know y'all either watch me and be bored, or you watch the January 6th hearings tonight, prime time, and be bored. I don't know. Maybe y'all can clue me in on how that is taking place. But in any case, that's what I'm talking about tonight. I'm going to talk about Uvalde because I tried to stay away from it and I couldn't. So we have some interesting stuff tonight. So I want y'all to stick around. Of course, I'm Carl Price. You listen to us on Conscious Fever Radio, ICE Entertainment Television, and all the platforms that you can find on social media. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to come back, and we're going to talk about the cowardly fake police in Texas. I'm not sure if it's just limited to Uvalde. It might be all over Texas, but we're going to talk about that. I'll be right back.
But it doesn't really matter, nothing matters, so I cry instead. I've been running circles, trying to catch my breath. I've been trying everything I can, but I ain't got nothing left. I've been staring at the ceiling, I've been staying up all night. Everything I ever worked for vanished in the blink of an eye. I've been asking every question, 'cause I haven't got a clue. Why's it gotta be me? What the hell am I supposed to do? Circles, trying to catch my breath. I've been trying everything I can, but I ain't got nothing left.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price. You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
All right, welcome back here on ICE Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. I am Carl Price, your host. I want to talk about this article here, the New York Times, The Shame of Uvalde, right? This is by Jay Cotsplain Kane. He's an opinion writer for the New York Times. I just want to talk about something. I really just want to talk about the opinion that he offered in reference to this before we get into a number of things. But before we do that, I really want to show y'all this raw video so y'all can really keep this in perspective. I know for some of you all, this has been a while, but we're going to show you. And if you can see here, these are the victims. These are the victims. And it's sad. It's really, really sad. But I want y'all to check out I want y'all to check out this video, and then I'm going to talk to y'all about some of what we have going on here. Check this out. Okay, the report says that nearly 400 officers at Uvalde, 400 officers, elementary school, as police waited to confront the gunman. So let's talk about this a second, right? So let's talk about what Jay is talking about here. Jay King is talking about here. So of course, most of y'all know now that this week the investigative committee from the Texas House of Representatives released a report about, and supposedly they're doing some investigation about really what went wrong And I think what they're trying to do is to avoid trying to call these police officers, this law enforcement, all these 400 officers cowards, right? Like what went wrong during the shooting in Uvalde, right? Because people are hungry for information or for new information that might come away satisfied or dissatisfied, right? But the Times on Sunday, the committee's report doesn't alter the overall understanding of the events that much of the public already has, right? The May 24th massacre at Robb Elementary School was accompanied by a law enforcement meltdown that may have prevented at least some wounded teachers and students from receiving needed medical attention. But given the conflict and at times flat-out false accounts that have been given about what happened in the more than 70 minutes that passed from when law enforcement first arrived at Robb and when officers killed the shooter, this report from Texas is really significant, even if it mostly reinforces what we already suspected, because it constitutes a comprehensive, formal government, for whatever that means, evaluation of who and what may have been to blame for what the committee called a case of systemic failures and egregious poor decision-making. You got to read it, and when you read it, you should probably read it in full if you're really interested in this. And according to King, as he sees it, these are the main findings. The report focuses on the actions or inactions of Pete Arredondo, the chief of the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Police Force, a unit budgeted for 6 officers assigned to patrol the district's 9 schools. Now, Arredondo was one of the first officers on the scene, and according to protocol, he was supposed to be in charge unless and until he was relieved of command by a higher level unit. His apparent inability to give clear or decisive orders, or even to communicate with fellow law enforcement officers, likely led to the unconscionable delay in breaching the classroom. If there's a main character in this report, it's Arredondo. Inside the 2 classrooms where the children were killed, most of the shots were fired before police arrived, but not before the police realized what was going on. Because as you notice in the video, they arrived just a couple of minutes later. 3 officers, part of a small group of initial responders, were repelled by the gunman's shots into the hallway as they tried to approach the classrooms. And I want y'all to really consume what I just said. 3 officers retreated after he shot it. This is the officers that we fund with all of this information, all of this equipment, etc., etc. But they ran away as they approached the classrooms. Then from the body camera footage, we know that relatively early on, one of the responding officers said, "Dude, we got to get in there." But they did nothing. In all, 376, nearly 400 law enforcement officers wound up at the scene. Ultimately, it was the United States Border Patrol Traffic Unit, they call it BORTAC, that breached the classroom door. By the time that happened, the report says, this is according to the Texas report, the tactical command inside the building had been de facto assumed by BORTAC. The report is more of an assessment of procedure than an investigative document intended to, in effect, indict any specific individuals. Its authors write, other than, and I quote, other than the attacker, the committee did not find any villains in the course of its investigation. There's no one to whom we can attribute malice or ill motives. Instead, we found systemic failures and egregious poor decision-making. Not sure if y'all are following what I just said. The report found systemic failures. When they say systemic, that means that don't blame it on the individual officers, but y'all just saw that the blame really should have been on those individual officers, right? And this is the report. This is another arm of law enforcement and government protecting these cowardly police officers. And I don't know how we can really continue to stomach that. But even though the committee didn't condemn Arredondo, which they should have, a reasonable interpretation is that the majority of that egregious poor decision-making was his. The report is many things, including a tribute to the victims, but at its core, it's an examination of how leadership should operate during a school shooting. According to the report, a terrible, and I quote, terrible, tragic mistake, maybe the most fateful, came from Arredondo's mischaracterization of what has happened or what was happening, instead of preliminarily approaching it as an active shooter situation, where protocol dictates that responders must try to neutralize the threat. Arredondo addressed it as a barricaded subject in their killing innocent, small, unarmed kids. And responders had time on their side and could afford to wait for the proper equipment. This is what Arredondo said, and personnel to arrive and for the right moment to act. When is there a right moment to act? When is, logistically, y'all, think about this. When is there a right moment to act? When you have kids, and that's something that you all didn't hear, where the yelling and the screamings and the begging and the pleading of the kids in the path of that shooter, asking for help while they were calling 911. And Arredondo is there asking or trying to decide when the right time to act was. I want y'all to understand that this is dangerous, because if this is an example of what's protecting us, we're all vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. Understandably that it takes time for law enforcement to arrive to a scene and assess it, but a whole hour when you know what's going on in there and you're trying to talk to this kid to come out, in light of the fact that you know that this is a trend across the country, get out of here. Despite being the school district's police chief, Arredondo apparently didn't think of himself as the lead officer. And the confusion over who was actually in charge deepened as more law enforcement personnel arrived at the school. This is how Arredondo explained his lack of leadership. Check this out. He says, while you're in there, you don't title yourself. I know our policy states you're the incident commander. My approach and thought was responding as a police officer. Yeah. Whatever you consider that to be. And so I didn't title myself. What the hell does titling have to do with protecting young kids, right? But once I got in there and we took that fire back, then I realized we need some things. We've got to get in that door. We need an extraction tool. We need those keys. As far as I'm talking about the command part, the people that went in, there was a big group of them outside that door. I have no idea who they were and how they walked in or anything. I wasn't given that direction. His response, right? Knowing he was supposed to be in command, but not acting like it, is haunting. During the stretch of time when the children and the teachers were wounded and in need of medical assistance, Arredondo and other officers called for flashbang grenades, snipers, rifle-rated shields, and helicopters, but there was no immediate interdiction. Perhaps the report's most infuriating detail is that one of the two classrooms was probably not locked. Arredondo would not have known this because, according to the report, nobody ever checked. The search for a key or a tool to open the door was chaotic. Nobody asked the principal who had a master key. A rifle-rated shield that could have handled the shooter's AR-15 rounds arrived well before the door was breached. But they stood outside. Now, this report also cast some doubt on whether Arredondo knew that children were making 911 calls from inside the classrooms, and on whether the first responders knew upon arrival that injured kids and teachers were inside the classrooms. Although they do say that circumstantial evidence suggested that possibility, likely referring to smoke, shell casings, and the smell of gunpowder mentioned elsewhere in the report, which should have tipped them off. Right? Pause there for just 1 second and understand this. This report is just as ridiculous as this whole situation. Because this report is also trying to protect the law enforcement officers that failed these damn kids. And that's the problem that all of us should be concerned with, right? Why is it that sometimes in law enforcement they're more concerned about protecting their asses than they are trying to get to a logical conclusion of what the failures were and who should take the blame? Like, there was no discussion about criminal consequences here for some of these officers. And I know that is horrible to think about. You send a police officer out to put him, to put his or her life in danger every day. And we're all sitting back saying, well, maybe they should be charged with the crime. I know that sounds horrible, but when it's epic, this last point, that Arredondo and some of the officers closest to the classroom might not have known that kids were inside, is almost impossible to believe, right? Because the New York Times has reported that several minutes before Border Patrol agents breached the classroom, someone believed to be Arredondo stated his assessment that injured kids were still inside. And keep in mind that the 911 calls were still coming, right? That doesn't mean he knew this when he made the decision to proceed as if it were a barricaded subject situation. But to take Arredondo's account at face value, you would probably have to think that he was confident enough earlier on that there were no injured victims inside two classrooms that he decided it wasn't even worth fully confirming. And then you would have to believe that even though several law enforcement officers determined fairly early on that they knew the shooting wasn't over, nobody alerted Arredondo, right? Even if all that were true, would it make Arredondo, the Uvalde Police Departments, or any of the other agencies, federal also, on the scene look any better? There are two ways to think about this, right? The first is that nearly 400 law enforcement personnel, all independently, failed to act in ways the public would expect of them as sworn officers of the law. The second is that Arredondo's seeming confusion and inability to provide any meaningful leadership created a single point of failure that eventually hindered the entire response. The former scenario now, at first glance, might seem crueler to law enforcement because it would be calling personal carriage into question. But aside from being improbable, recall that one of the officers who responded early on was urging his colleagues to get inside the room. It also suggests that the problem was one of individual initiative, assuming that different officers in the same situation would have made different, better decisions. The problem with thinking about it that way is that eventually there were nearly 400 officers on the scene. Some were almost certainly brave people who would have charged into the room if they were given orders to do so. Others might have seized up under the pressure. It's difficult to know without trying to pathologize hundreds of individuals. Now, the latter scenario I just talked about, in which hundreds of officers remained in a holding pattern because nobody seemed to know who was in charge, and Bortak ultimately springing into decisive action after overriding the faltering command structure, suggests a much more troubling systemic malfunction. If Arredondo was in effect the primary point of failure, the public should ask why a police officer in charge of a 6-unit squad dedicated to a relatively small municipality school district was placed in such a position. I don't intend to excuse Arredondo's actions, whether during the crisis or in the days after. When he brazenly assumed his position of the Uvalde City Council, he subsequently resigned and began spreading half-truths and misdirections about what happened. But it should be asked, why did none of the officers of the different arriving agencies assume command from what should have been clearly identified as a bumbling disaster of a leader? And during all that time that lapsed, why did so many officers seem to make it a priority, the protocol, or a baffling hierarchy over the urgent need for anyone, to reach the children and teachers inside the classroom with the gunman. When nearly 400 officers from an assortment of agencies show up, the failure cannot be an individual one, nor can it simply be attributed to a bad day by one agency. This was a breakdown of the entire concept of a chain of command. There's one last detail in the report that caught my attention. In a section detailing the failures on the part of the school and the district, the committee wrote, "Poor Wi-Fi connectivity in Robb Elementary School likely delayed the lockdown alert." Yeah. Everything they could blame on what is going on, they did. But this shouldn't be overlooked as a minor concern. When word was spreading around campus that the attacker had arrived, Robb Elementary's principal attempted to initiate a lockdown on the Raptor application, but she had difficulty making the alert because of a bad Wi-Fi signal. This probably meant that some teachers had less time to lock their doors, hide their students, and barricade themselves inside. Consider the possibility that a basic investment in infrastructure, reliable Wi-Fi instead of all of those weapons, y'all saw, something available in nearly every Starbucks in America could have saved the lives that all the flashbangs, shields, snipers, and SWAT teams did not. In Uvalde, all that manpower, firepower, and training were derailed largely by one blundering character who apparently spent precious time searching for a key to what was likely an unlocked door to deal with an unthinkable tragedy that might have been mitigated if the school's Wi-Fi had been functioning properly, according to the committee. When it comes time to invest in protecting schools to ensure that what happened at Robb Elementary never happens again, we're probably certain it's going to happen again, what do you think would be prioritized? More weapons for law enforcement, who may very well stand back again for over 70 minutes while children and teachers bled out, or the basic infrastructure of a functioning school? You be the judge. Give me your comments on that. If all that comes out of this are some door-busting tools for school police officers and a few more guns, we would have collectively failed. The report states that the shooter killed most of his victims before law enforcement set foot in the building. That's what the report says. One way to keep those kids safe would have been a functioning infrastructure and a better way to keep guns out of the hands of the shooter. These sorts of changes don't involve materialized or prison-like additions to schools or the prospect of arming teachers. Basic functioning schools should be the first priority as we try to figure out how to protect our children. It's really just that simple. How basic is the failure? I don't know how basic it is, but I noticed that a lot of you have actually commented. So I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back on the other side of the break, I'm going to deal with your comments, and the rest of the show, we're just going to talk about your comments. So I want y'all to stay with me. It's Conscious Fever, Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. I'm Carl Price, your host.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me.
All right, welcome back to Conscious Fever, Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. I am Carl Price, your host. I have come back and give me that drop if you don't mind.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
All right, I'm going to take your comments here. And while I do that, I'm going to clear out some of these comments here if y'all don't mind for me to do that. Let's see here. Go away. Okay. Now I'm going to come over here just a little bit. Oh, y'all like seeing my window back here. But listen, let's talk about some of these comments because I know y'all were very active. First and foremost, let me go to Comment Central here. And thank y'all for watching. Thanks for joining the show tonight. Greg Freeman down in Knoxville, you are talking about Gulliver, a traffic stop. A traffic stop tonight. Yeah. I think what he's referring to, y'all, and I'm gonna expound on this because I was actually looking for this. What he's talking about is something very interesting. He's talking about an event that happened in Memphis. I think it was in Memphis, Tennessee. I mean, imagine this: police running into a man's house to catch him for a traffic stop. As a result of a traffic stop, beat him, tase him. You can hear all this on the tape, and I wish I had the tape. I'll actually show it to you, show it to everybody tonight. But actually beat him for a traffic stop. But you got 400 standing outside, and refusing to go in to actually help some screaming kids and screaming kids into a classroom. I am trying to figure out how we put our heads around that. It's okay to chase somebody for a traffic stop, but when you have a gunman there, you don't do anything. Self-preservation is your natural right. I think it's a good idea for people to actually train in means of self-defense. It doesn't only apply for firearms. Yeah, I agree with that, Junior. But let's talk about your comment about self-preservation. I want to talk about your self-preservation. What is the self-preservation here? I mean, police officers are out there, and I know you're in law enforcement, but police officers are out there to protect. That means that when you put that badge on, one of the things that you have decided to do is to put your life on the line. If you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't wear the badge. Plain and simple. Gullible. Okay. Okay, Greg, I'm with you on that. You still feel the round when you get hit, even with the vest. It can break bones at times. At the same time, you have to be smart in your own tactics. Yeah, but Junior, do your tactics include not doing anything? And let's be honest. Not a whole lot of police officers have been killed that have had those vests on, or even seriously injured. I'll give you some stats on that if you want it. It's also a known fact everyone that wears the uniform isn't built for the uniform. I'm always amazed by some of the people who are chosen through the hiring process to get on with the department. Don't be amazed. Don't be amazed, Junior. I'm telling you, man, don't be amazed. That's the problem with law enforcement in this country. It's almost like a hereditary thing. You got a kid who was a nerd all his life, but because his grandfather and his father were police officers, then for somehow we in the city make them police officers. Go figure. I'm still trying to figure that out. Death has made some men heroes, and the thought of death has made men cowards. Yeah. I mean, well, I don't even know how to respond to that, but there were definitely cowards there. I'm amazed that the front doors of the school were just open like that. That isn't allowed anymore with JCPS, at least. Cosmic failure, Junior. Cosmic failure. That's why they were open. They are cowards, Anita. I completely agree. They are cowards. But what should we do about the fact? What should we do about this? I mean, nobody's talking about criminal charges. Nobody's talking about firing them. And this report that I just talked to y'all about, everybody's trying to figure out a way to justify that what they did was okay. If you read the reports very closely, that's what's going on. Here's our good person, Dr. Pruitt. Every election cycle, same old, and people believe everything they see on camera. I can't. What is it that you don't believe about what I'm talking about, Dr. Pruitt? I wish I could bring you in. I wish I had the phone hooked up. We can bring you in and we can talk about it. We can really talk about it. But I'm not sure what you saw. I'm going to invite you to tell us what you think you saw and what you think we didn't see. From my experience in dealing with schools, a lot of schools would rather seem secure, safe, rather than actually be safe, secure. To many bigwigs, desk riders, and hold on, let me go back. Let me go back here. And sheep have too many hands in the say-so, but have zero experience in security law enforcement. Yeah, but Junior, but let's just keep it real, man. I mean, human nature should tell you that you should respond and try to protect those kids under those circumstances. So I'm not sure about all of that. Good evening, Norma Board. Thank you for joining the broadcast and commenting. I can hear the liberals now. Defund the police, take away guns, blah, 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 blah. Here's an idea. Keep your children at home and educate them yourselves. Problem solved. Yeah, maybe. But I think if there's any time to defund the police, I think it's now, in terms of Uvalde, at least. Not all police, but definitely they need to do some defunding in Uvalde. There was I was going to show you all another little piece here, and hopefully I can find it. But it's a very interesting piece here. Inner city schools are safe because they are locked in because of the violence surrounding the schools in these communities. It's like a prison. Interesting thought. Prison. Well, I mean, if Uvalde was treated like a prison, Alvin, if Uvalde was treated like a prison, we wouldn't be having this conversation. What do you think about that? True, most schools are locked like prison. If this is real and not a false flag event, it was planned and allowed. Parents, take your children out of the schools and educate them yourselves, and you have no problem. But will you do that? Or will you keep blaming other people? Okay, Dr. Pruitt, here we go. 55 years ago when I was in elementary school, it was safe like churches. Yeah, I agree with you. That was in the 60s. I agree with you, Alvin. I'm not sure if they were safe as, but I mean, I don't know if they were safe as churches. Meanwhile, in Louisville, 4 dead after 3 shootings in one day. Okay, Dr. Pruitt. Yeah. Listen, we got to get on. I got to get you guys on again to talk about the shootings in Louisville, and particularly not only in Louisville, but all over this country. Particularly, let's not lose sight of the black-on-black crime epidemic that we're still experiencing for the last 50 years in this nation. The best example, let me send that out and bring it back. The best example we have in Kentucky is in Fayette County. They developed their own police department and have officers assigned to schools and have been functioning for a few years now. So you think it's working? You think it's working in Lexington? JCPS still has a long way to go. Yeah, I agree with that. JCPS has got a lot to do. The gematria of value of Uvalde is first female president. This is telling, considering that you know who is sick and their plan is to put in a female president. Won't happen, but they are so predictable with their predictive, I like that, predictive programming and coded messages. Keep talking to us, Dr. Pruitt. We're going to try to figure it out before the end of the show. As a law enforcement officer, you have a duty to respond. I completely and totally agree that, I always do that. Yeah, can you make that go away? Thanks. But I completely and totally agree that there's a duty to respond. I am just blown away. I'm completely blown away by the fact that actual human beings, forget that they're law enforcement, but actual human beings that will walk up and hear children screaming while 911 calls are being made. And keep in mind, this whole idea that the report says that the Wi-Fi was bad, I want y'all to keep in mind that the kids were able to get out. And they could have been, I mean, people were calling 911. It could have been cellular data. Could have been. But y'all know as well as I do, every time we go into a building that we're familiar with and we frequent, it connects to the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi could get those calls out. Tell me why Wi-Fi couldn't get all the other stuff out. But any human being, even today, when we walk past a box and we hear puppies whining, we'll stop and just try to help. Even if it's in an abandoned building, we'll go in there not knowing what's in there. So how do you explain that this law enforcement of nearly 400 men, I think we're all men, I didn't see any women, would just go in? I'm just trying to understand, and Junior, since you're on here and you're law enforcement officer, I am just simply trying to understand, where have we lost the ideal that, where have we lost the whole ideal that you take the job and sometimes you may have to put your life on the line for another life, right? I mean, we all have jobs like that we may find ourselves doing something that doesn't feel very, very comfortable for us. And in law enforcement, it is, sometimes the kitchen is very hot and explosive. And if you can't handle the heat, y'all know the saying, if you can't handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen. That is what has me baffled. Is that if this is what this is what you signed up to do, why can't you do it? Unless you're a coward. I can only imagine. I can only imagine what teachers are thinking these days. Here's another comment. Conservatives use black-on-black crime as cover to promote the expansion of deadly weapons. Yeah, but don't look, Alvin. I'm gonna say something about that, man. I'm gonna say something about this because you brought it up. I'm gonna say something about this. Listen, I don't agree with that narrative, man. I'm gonna tell you, that's a narrative. Can you put that away for me, please? Yes, thanks. That's a narrative that I don't agree with. And we have to be careful when we say something like that, okay? And here's what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm talking about, Alvin. It's easy for us as black folks to respond and say, oh, conservatives always bring up black-on-black crime to make another point. But, man, let's just keep this real. Shouldn't they bring up black-on-black crime? I mean, what's the alternative? We attack conservatives because they bring it up when it's an epidemic in our community, and none of us know whether we are going to be next or whether somebody we love is going to be next, or somebody we know, or somebody we love that knows somebody that knows somebody. Right? So I don't really buy into this. Now, I've heard that a lot, especially from a lot of black activists. They say, well, should be criticizing black-on-black crime because that takes us away from the real point we're trying to make, and that is police brutality, or that is more guns and stuff like that. What the fuck? And people are still being killed in the black community by black people. Come on, man. So I don't really want to go there, because I think that is the unfortunate activism in this country, the so-called activism in this country that's really failing us. It's telling us not to talk about the things that are really, really killing us, and really killing our community. So I don't really buy into that, Alvin. I'm sorry, man. When I hear that, I just feel like it needs to be talked about. Here's a long one. As you know, Freemasons speak to each other in codes like gematria. Calculate Uvalde via gematria, and it comes up first female president. Hold on, bring it back. First female president. Of course, the Grand Army of the Republic won't allow it, but that was the plan. Uvalde is code, whether real or not. When you know, you know. Okay, Dr. Pruitt. I guess you know. I guess you know. I don't care what the code is. I don't care what the code is. I'm not going to treat this as if it's something, Dr. Pruitt, that didn't happen. It happened. I want you to go in Uvalde, Texas, and just stand in the middle of town square, Dr. Pruitt. I'm not put you in danger, but I'm just saying, if you would go there and just say, just tell those parents that lost those kids that their kids were used as pawns to make a bigger political point. You might make it out. You might not make it out. I don't know, but I'm just saying. Lack of training, fear can all be factors as to why things went the way they did. From experience, there needs to be more of a partnership between schools and law enforcement, better maps of the layout of the building. Come back. Some of these campuses are huge. I've had to sit and find maps with LMPD until we could respond to the actual issue. Junior, I don't buy that, man. I'm sorry. I don't buy that. I think if you're going to put on a uniform, you need to be prepared. And you don't, life, when there's a life at stake, you don't get an opportunity to do all this stuff that you're talking about, man. That's just justifying why this stuff happened. And I'm not saying you're an advocate of that. I'm just saying kids are killed in school and it becomes a political debate, a discussion that has been going on since Sandy Hook. Yeah, I don't care whether it's a political debate or not. My concern is that it's happening and it continues to happen. And that may be a discussion for another day because it continues to happen and we continue to do nothing about it. The conservatives, the gun lovers are blaming it on mental illness. It's not mental illness, gun lovers. Okay, let's just be clear. It's not mental illness. It's a combination of mental illness and guns, right? Because as I travel to and from my office every day, I ride past a lot of mentally ill people, right? And I've never been killed. You know why? Because they didn't have the other part of the combination. And the other part of the combination is a firearm. So chill with the bullshit that, guns don't kill people, people do. No, people and guns kill people. If you took guns out of the equation, we wouldn't have people being killed by guns. It's really just that simple. So anyway, here's another comment, and then I'm going to get out of here. I feel we need to take more proactive measures rather than being the usual reactive or reactivate. School buildings need to be more secure. Okay, if you say so. If these shooters are mentally ill, execute their asses. Yep. I don't disagree with you on that, Alvin. Oops, you came over too quick. Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I don't disagree with you at all. I'm not sure if we should execute them without due process, though. I think we should give them their due process rights, then consider executing them. To me, that just makes much more sense. Yes, it may have happened. If it did, we pray for the victims. I just don't know why we keep complaining rather than educating our own children. Well, Dr. Pruitt, you make a good point because I always thought that I was the best educator for my children. But the reality is that everybody can't do that. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody's not prone to homeschool their children, and everybody just doesn't have that luxury. So, and when you're poor, unfortunately, you have to work and you have to send your kids to school because that's free daycare. It's one way of looking at it. Anyway, listen, y'all. I have been here. I'm a little dark in here tonight, and I don't know why. I'm going to come back over here. I'm a little bit dark in here tonight. Which reminds me that we have this series coming up, and the name of the series is Bedroom Stories. So y'all have to watch out for the bedroom stories. There are different men and women all over the country that are sitting in their pajamas or their robe, their night robe, their bedtime robe, I guess, or some in underwear, and they are telling bedtime stories for about 5 minutes or so, maybe 3 to 5 minutes to put you to bed. And they're in these bedrooms that are real sexy. A lot of times it's raining in the background. So I want y'all to keep an eye out for that. That's a part of Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever. And of course, our very own Dr. Pruitt. We're going to get her here really when we have time to put it all together. But this was something serious tonight, and this is why. Hold on, I got another comment from Dr. Pruitt. She says, "I don't buy that, Brother Carl. We can rally together and have someone in our community to teach our children." Yeah, I mean, I agree. I completely agree. I agree with you, but it really isn't that easy for a lot of people. People found a way to educate their own children during the shutdown, but they can't do it now. Don't buy it, love. Okay. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of other factors there as well, Dr. Pruitt. We can talk about it another day. This is off topic, but a 4-year-old was instructed by his father to shoot at the police that dragged him out of the car. We have moved away from the age of peace and security. I mean, he probably felt like that's something that he needed to be doing for his kids. I mean, you know, when that stuff happens, I mean, people get angry, and I'm sure Daddy probably said that out of just or something like that. I mean, I'm sure that was the case, Alvin. I mean, I don't think anybody wants their kids shooting at the police, but I think that in a given time, I think they're willing to. I think Dad's emotion drove him to say that, and that's not really off topic. But what would you do? What would you do if you had an AR-15 in your house and the police came in there violating your rights, right? I mean, it's either, I mean, you know, if you had an AR-15, you might as well use it. And I'm not advocating that, but I'm just saying you might as well use it because the likelihood, especially if you're black, you're probably not going to make it out. You know what I'm saying? You're probably not going to make it out. Great show. Get some rest, dear. Good night, family. Good night, Dr. Pruitt. Thank you for joining us as always. And likewise, I want to thank you all for joining me for the show tonight. I appreciate you. I know I'm on YouTube, Conscious Fever, et cetera, and all of that. But anyway, I'm about to get out of here. Listen, thanks for joining us tonight. This has been Conscious Fever on Ice Entertainment Television, Conscious Fever Radio. I'm about to get out of here. Don't forget to join us next week. I don't know what the topic is going to be, but we're going to talk about something because we're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about singles because we discovered that there are like 60% of relationships in this country are of single people, not married people. Like 60, better than 60%. So we're going to talk about singles. We're going to talk about this new thing that they have, that they talk about, and singles and all the good stuff that comes along with talking about singles. Thank you, Tammy. Sad show, but good points raised. I hope so. I hope people pay attention to actually what is really going on and why we are forced to deal with what we're dealing with. We're talking about this tonight, but it can happen tomorrow, and it can be so close to home. It can be so close to home that it's sort of ridiculous. Anyway, I am going to get out of here. You know how I do this. I just send you all out with another commercial. A few commercials before we get to our end credits. So thanks for joining me.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
And I will see you all next week. Good night.
What do you see? Do you see a kid from Compton? I see a bright future. I see a city where anything can happen, where legacies are built. LA is special. The star power, the ideas, the energy. Opportunity in this city could still be 1,000,000 miles away. But that never stopped us. Because we bet on ourselves. We bet on each other, and that's the power of LA. She's a city that favors the bold, the dreamers, the risk takers, the ones willing to put it all on the line. The future belongs to those who believe in something they can't see, but can feel. Anything can happen here, and whatever does, it belongs to those of us who are made in LA.
I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord that I wake again. I wake again, I pray the Lord that I Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord that I wake again. I wake again, I pray the Lord that I wake.
You are listening. Hosted by Carl Price on 97thebeatfm.com.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh yes it is. Then I go to my brother, and I say, brother, help me please. But he wind up knocking me back down on the knee. Oh, there've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long. I'm able, Father, to carry on. And it's been a long time coming, but I know
I know a change gonna